Hey everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and that makes this the first ever episode 29 of Cloud Control. And we're back at it again. We've just gotten through all the Summer Games Fest-esque announcements. So there's been a lot of game trailers and, exciting news in our lives right now. So excited to talk about that today, hey?
Mm-hmm. I went through the gauntlet. I watched every single presentation. Cheated slightly by having to sit for 9 hours for a tattoo yesterday. So you can watch a lot of showcases in 9 hours when you have to sit very still.
Some might say you could watch all of the showcases in that amount of time. There was a lot though,
sure.
That's impressive. I definitely did not watch all of them live. I did the whole read the recap on what's the one we always say is the best? Is it Game Trailers? Polygon? Games Radar. Games Radar always has the best recap. So yeah, we got a lot to talk about today, of course, from all those showcases. But let's just get into the housekeeping portion of the game, I guess. Just wanted to point out, we've had a lot of new listeners recently, but you're not subscribed to the show, guys. So it would mean a lot to us if you're listening to the show for the first time, or you're not subscribed to our channels wherever you're listening. Would be great if you could do that. Just help us grow the show, reach more people, all that good stuff. So we appreciate that, of course, from anyone who's willing to do so. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about all of the other non-Summer Game Fest showcase presentations, including like Xbox, Ubisoft, Tribeca Games, Devolver. There was a lot, PC Gaming Show. So we'll get all those, discussed in the second half of the show. But to start off, we're actually going to be talking about a game that came to Game Pass about a month ago that Kate and I just got really addicted to this at the same time. And this game is, of course, Cassette Beasts, which is a creature catching game, very inspired by Pokemon, of course, which is something we're always looking out for. But it's got a few really interesting wrinkles. It was made by two employees, actually, that started on with Chucklefish working on War Grooves. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit I didn't know until just coming down to record this show, but have to throw that out there. It's always cool to see these games made by, such small teams, and they've made a pretty impressive product here, I would say. So, Kate, what do you think of Cassette Beasts? Where do you want to start?
I love Cassette Beasts. I will say as a fun little tidbit, this is a great game to play while you're watching showcases because you can just kind of have it up. Turn-based games always work really well, but yeah, I think I saw you showed me this game and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want another creature capture game, and then I started playing it and didn't put it down. It's really good. First of all, I think my main thing is I love the creatures in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of these creature capture games, they tend to be very Pokemon centric. And it's kind of a hard elephant in the room to get around. But these creatures I found were all so incredibly unique. Like the one on the screen here is this little bat guy, but his wings are like leather scraps. And then when he evolves, he makes a trench coat out of his wings he wraps around him. And there's another one later that's like a fish in a fish bowl, but then it has mechanical legs so it can walk around. And they're all just kind of a bit strange. They're like the one or two Pokemon that would be in every gen that seem to not really fit in too much, but that's the whole roster here.
That's a really good explanation of how they're designed. I totally agree. They're that's the thing that stuck out to me from this game the most is the creature designs, and I think that's why I was so compelled to go all the way through and see where these creatures go, because a lot of the times they don't turn into something you're expecting. Like one of my favorites was this bullet that you find, and it's it's fire type. It runs across the map shooting in a straight line, and by the time it transforms all the way, it's like a T-Rex with a cannon in its chest, and it's this is so cool. So I really, really enjoyed that. I guess we should say the premise of the game is you get warped into this alternate dimension, and you're on this island, and people from all these different dimensions are around. You're basically in this world exploring the creatures, meeting friends, and trying to figure out how to get home. And so you're doing that by collecting these different beasts. It's called Cassette Beasts because you catch them with cassette tapes, which I guess is an interesting wrinkle on how you catch them. But I wouldn't say the story and the world for me really killed it. It was like you said, the creatures and the battle system, I think, that were pretty interesting and very fresh. I don't know, did you want to talk about the battle system now? Because I kind of do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the battle system is the really meaty part of this game too, because obviously the creatures are your main motivation to play, but I really enjoyed the battle system. I think it's basically like the perfect style for one of these games, in my opinion. Like, it's always a 2 versus 2, so I think that all like immediately adds a lot of like complexity to how you want to play it. And then it does what I think is the best thing that a battle system of this style can have, which is like mana points. So you have those little pips. If you're watching on the screen, you can see under the health bar there's like those little squares that fill in. Every turn you regen 2 mana, and moves cost a certain amount of mana. So you might have a move that's like a really weak attack, but it's free, it doesn't cost anything. Or you might have a strong attack that then costs like 4, so you can't use it on the first turn. You've got to wait to save up some mana. And I think with these systems, like it solves the problem of like use your best move every turn, and like why even bother having multiple moves, because one is just like objectively better. But here now there's like a tactic of like, how you conserve that resource in addition to having moves that are strong or work well in certain situations. So I just I love that this is becoming a common thing in these creature capture games.
Yeah, you know what it is to me is it's like the modern advent of when people removed live systems from platformers. Like it makes it a little bit more interesting. And
Mm-hmm.
this game, I totally agree, and I love managing the mana, because you get some creatures on your team where it's like, okay, I've got a move here where I can actually steal mana from the opposing team, and then this one can
Mm-hmm.
actually give mana to my other guy. So I had a setup at one point where I was like, this one creature I had was just leeching mana and passing it along to this other creature that I had, which had like powerhouse moves, and it was cool to play around with, and it's something that not all of these type of games lets you play with, because oftentimes you're just kind of more concerned with like the type matchups than you are your
Mm-hmm.
resources. And that brings me to the type chart, which is very interesting in this game. And I think it actually was my favorite aspect of the
Yeah.
game in general. For as good as the rest of the systems were, I just really loved the refreshing type chart in this game. Not only was it kind of based on some different elements you don't usually see, like of course there's the classic like fire and plant and water and those, but there's like cosmic in this game. There's glass as a type, plastic, like there's all these different
Mm-hmm.
resources you get. And the part that's so cool about it is it's not really the advantages and disadvantages on the chart. It looks just like a Pokemon type chart, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
about doing extra damage and getting bigger hits in terms of like on the HP bar, but instead what the type advantages do in this game is it's really involved with status effects, and just the
Mm-hmm.
logic behind like how they reason it was so cool to me. Like if you have, I think it was a beast type and it hit a glass type monster, it would shatter the glass and then leave like
Mm-hmm.
shards on the ground around that monster. So then if you go and use a physical hit on it again, you take damage from like walking through broken glass. And that is so cool. And another one is like if a plastic type gets hit with a fire move, it will start smoking or whatever happens, and it'll kind of like this smoke that's created will increase your evasion because your opponents can no longer see you. So it's just like really smart, playful ways to change up what's always otherwise is like,
Yeah.
oh, fire burns grass, like same thing over and over.
Yeah. I agree. It was so refreshing, and I really liked the way they like doled out the information, because it wasn't just an overwhelming type chart you have to just look at and like memorize. It would remind you in the battle the first couple times that it happened. So you would use a move and not really know, and then something would happen, you'd get the effect, and it would pop up with a little text to tell you. And then after you use that combination of elements, it would like give you a little indication before you use the move. So like one of my favorites that I found was like if you used a poison type move on a metal creature, instead of it like affecting them and them being poisoned, they would actually get coated in the poison on their like metal body, so that if anything then touched them, they would get the poison, which makes sense because you're made of metal. Like you're not a biological thing that will get poisoned. You just like hold the poison, and then whatever touches you pass along. But that was really cool. And so you use that move for the first time to find out what it does. And then every time now when you target a metal type with the poison move, it shows you like this is gonna be the status condition that happens. So it was really like there's a lot of them. There are tons and tons of different combinations to memorize, but it was really good UI in the sense of like it told you when it was relevant for you to know. And then you always had a reminder of like the negative or the positive of using that type of move. And it was really neat. And then there were other times in the battle where I'd be like, okay, I don't really care about this like status condition too much, so I'm going to use this move that's not super effective, but it's fine because I want the damage, and like I'm okay with them getting the bonus if it's something I don't think they'll be able to utilize. So like one of them gives like extra AP gain, but they're full of AP, so I don't care. Like they've already like filled their bar up, so I can basically use this for free. And I like, you can kind of weigh the like positives and negatives as opposed to something like just Pokemon where it's like just objectively worse all the time, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess we'd be remiss to not talk about the fusion system in battles as well, which is like the, you know, final piece of what makes the battling really unique in this game, which is that you can see you have companions kind of coming with you, and there's a whole system around that. I guess we can talk about it a little bit, but as you kind of go through the game, you complete quests with these companions, you actually gain the ability to fuse your monsters together. So while the battles are usually 2-on-2, you can combine your monsters, and they, you know, they become more powerful depending on sort of your bond with that extra companion. And then also it gains the move sets of both the creatures that are combined, and generates, I think, double AP as well, right? Like it gets 4 a turn instead of 2. So you kind of get this different strategy when you've mixed your creature, because it of course changes the types, and you only have 1 attack per turn, but then you're also this much stronger creature, and you can kind of choose to fuse or unfuse depending on the situation. But I found it was very, very useful. Like most of the tougher battles in this game, I would definitely make sure to fuse, and you get to know too, like, oh, these two are really strong fused together, you know. Like I don't know if you ever found the ability reroll, or if something you I found a reroll, and it's like a move you can put on which gives you a percentage chance to just use the attack below it for free on any given turn.
Oh yes,
So I would
my
use that, and it was just like,
Pyromancer guy had it.
yeah, it's so good. Like when you find that kind of combination, it's very satisfying to find like, okay, this is not only is this my team, but when I go into this next battle, I need these two to be fused together so I can use their combination of moves, you know. Just that extra layer of nuance.
Yeah, I think so. I found it really to be the perfect balance of like not too complicated that you had to really like plan something out in depth. But when you did plan out a team, or you just picked two monsters to start with that kind of complemented each other, it felt satisfying in that it was easy to figure out and make like creative choices, but you weren't like super penalized if you just wanted to try out new monsters and just, you know, see what they were capable of. So I found the balance like always to kind of be like perfect in the game as well. And like some of the boss fights, one of the main things you do is you fight these things called archangels, and they're actually like really interesting. It goes in this weird kind of almost creepy art style, and they're all sort of like kind of like monstrosities. They're sort of like breaking the logic of the
It's
world
sort
in
of
some way. Like,
Inscription-esque in a weird way, you
yeah,
know?
it really came out of nowhere and surprised me, but some of those fights are genuinely quite difficult, and you have to really like plan a strategy or figure out like what they're doing and a way to counter it. So like for example, there was one that kind of wasn't super strong, but once it built up to its full meter, it had this massive attack that would just like obliterate your guys. And so I'd find I'd have to time it that the turn before he did the massive attack, put up some kind of like barrier or defense to try to block it, so I didn't just get like one shot. And so that was kind of like a weird little like almost like a mini game I had to play in the fight. And a few other ones have similar kind of things where you have to like figure out like a pattern and play around it, which I never seen before in like one of these kind of games, and was really neat.
I like the way they use those fights to change up what is usually a normal battle. It kind of reminds me of you know, Digimon Cyber Sleuth when you fight those eaters, and to me that this is like a better version of that, because those unique fights in that game actually were, I would say, worse than the regular fights. Whereas in this game, like I looked forward to fighting each of those archangels because it was a chance to fight, you know, something that didn't have a type advantage or would use unique strategies against you, which felt very different compared to the regular battles. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
I wanted to just say one thing about the battle system, just a slight nitpick. I think the next standard we need to get to, everyone, is we need to have a turn counter, or like an order of turn movement bar in all these games, like that would have just made this perfect for me, because like you are keeping track of a lot of statuses, and you know what's going to hit first. Are they going to get this buff first or not? Are they going to take this damage first? And you can keep track of it, but just having that extra bit of clarity, showing like who's going to move when on the side, because there's also a few battles where there's quite a few characters, because you can call for help or you can run into swarms of enemies, and it's kind of hard to know like which one you're targeting at times. So I really would have just appreciated that, is the one critique that I would have.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think there's really like I don't think it being obscured adds enough that the convenience of having that turn timer wouldn't be worthwhile. And especially actually in that video, there's a move called Undertow, which like you use it, you hits like whichever character was last in the, like, did their move last in the battle. So like if you're first and you're really fast, and then the enemy was slow, so they did their move at the last turn on that round, then you go first Undertow it, it's going to hit them. But this guy called for help, which is one of my favorite moves. It's like 50% chance it works. You just call for help and some random monster shows up and helps you fight. But that random monster used it and got it in the wrong turn order and like hit his own team, which I've definitely done, because I'm like, oh, I'm pretty sure I go like in this order, and it's like, nope,
it's pretty
that
funny.
Didn't happen.
Yeah, so I mean, it's all really cool stuff. I guess we should transition and talk a little bit about just the world and overall how it works, because to me, I think that's where the game was very like not as strong as it was in the battle and like the art style system. I think the fact that it was made obviously by a really small team, that just probably wasn't their priority. But I didn't find it overly fun to kind of, the map was fun to explore in the sense that I wanted to uncover like, oh, what's around the corner, you know, what creatures they're going to be, what type of environments. But I wouldn't say like the movement is overly fun or anything like that. You know, it's pretty standard stuff.
Yeah, I would say that I was pleased that there were some like light puzzles. Like every now and again, you'd get to something that was kind of fun to solve, like, you know, how to get these like switches in the right order, or like, you know, like a little thing you'd have to like these rocks are in this kind of formation. It looks like maybe one's missing. Like if I put a rock here, and you get something out of it. So it was, I think, like kind of cute in certain areas. I would say I was quite neutral to the world. I think it was like good enough in this terms of how open it was that you could explore, that it was pleasant, but I wouldn't say it kind of like added a hell of a lot. But I think like you're right, their priority was definitely in the mechanics, the monster design, and I think they nailed that so incredibly well that I think this is the perfect place for a sequel to come in and just add like another aspect to the game of making the world just that much more of like a not like a mechanic, but just something that's like alive within the game. Because like I think it was just more to facilitate all the other parts that were fantastic. So that's just something that like a sequel would just add that little extra bit to.
Yeah, I agree. And there are some good ideas in here, you know, like what I really did appreciate about the world is like there's little corners you can kind of find, and there's like, oh, a little cave's over here, so you'd go in the cave and there's a little puzzle to solve, but it's something you could have easily walked by had you not been paying attention, you know. And then I think the way they deal with sort of traversal is really cool. Like the world itself is quite vertical and has a lot of spots that you can't initially reach, and so while it's not a huge world, it kind of unlocks itself as you go and gain kind of the HM equivalent abilities, whether it's like the gliding or the magnetism. You can like pull yourself up on these giant cranes later on. Like it's kind of doled out to you in a nice you know, at a nice pace, I feel.
Yeah, and the way you get them is nice too. Like he isn't just like some ability you run into. There's certain monsters that when you catch them, they teach you the ability. So you like don't know how to glide, and then you catch like a monster that flies, and it kind of like you get wings from that. And so it's kind of like flavored really nicely within the context of, you know, the point being catching all of these monsters.
And we should say too, the catching itself is actually kind of interesting as well. Not because it's very much different than Pokemon, like you're still just choosing which cassette, you know, there's different types just like there are Pokeballs, but the catching is like I would say it's probably the most difficult of any of these type of games that I've played in terms of like your percentage chance, because your character, like you can see when you go into a battle, you turn into the monster that you're using, but you actually have to just use, like when you go to use a cassette to transform, actually like they're doing right now, it's if you're watching the video, is
Mhm.
like you turn back to your person. So if you take a hit, it actually lowers your percentage chance to catch, just like if your other character hits the monster that you're trying to catch, it will increase the percentage, just like if you're weakening it. But it's kind of like twofold in this game, because you also have to protect yourself while you're trying to catch. And then, unless you're really
Yeah.
overpowered or something, I found it actually like pretty tough at the start of the game.
Yeah, especially at the beginning, I found it challenging. Like I had a setup where I had to like, there's a ability where you can make different like walls in front of your character, so it'll like tank the next like 2 or 3 hits. So I would like set up a wall in front of whomever was going to do the capturing, and then I would get them low, and then I would have that person with the wall capture, and the other person like do their biggest attack to try to get like the percentage to go up as high as possible. And it became like a little game, like you really had to split. And I think the best, like that was fun, more fun than just like a percentage chance because it was interactive. But the best part on catching, I will say, is that when you press the record button to try to catch something, that character will not die from anything that round. So that lets you use like your biggest wall up move, and like you want to give them status conditions so they take like poison or like burn damage at the same time, and they just like eat a mouthful of damage, but you don't have to stress about if you accidentally kill them, like in Pokemon, you're like, oh, okay, one more hit, and then they'll be in catch range, and then you crit, and it's just the worst thing ever. But in this game, like none of that stress. It's just like setting up the right condition to catch. And I think that was such a smart detail.
Yeah, 100%. And what's funny? I'm going to admit to you, I did not know that. I guess I just
You
wasn't in that
didn't
situation. I just never happened to like have something that
know?
close to death when I was catching it. But that's funny. I had
That's funny.
I had something opposite happen to me. Like while you're trying to catch them, you can be KO'd. So I've
Yeah.
like my tamers were KO'd a few times while I was trying to catch things. Like that that definitely happened. More than once. So but yeah, I don't know, like do you have anything else you want to wrap up on Cassette Beast? Anything we've missed or
Yeah, I think like this is I just really would recommend Cassette Beasts. I think it's definitely one of those things like if you're itching for a creature capture game, like at least for me, I find that they're very like I go through phases where I really
mm-hmm.
want one and then I'm good for a while. But I think it doesn't necessarily look like it's going to be the best on the box. But if you give it a chance and get into it, I think it's generally one of my favorite creature capture games I've played in a long time.
I'm in the exact same boat. I think at face value, like you said, it's not maybe the most impressive looking thing unless you see the character art first, like the monsters. But it's up there.
Mhm.
I would have to really sit down and think now and remove myself now that I've finished this. I don't think you're quite at the end yet, right?
No, I think I've got a little
Yeah.
bit left to do. I've maybe got like 10% left of the map to discover and some
Yeah.
more
Okay.
creatures to evolve. But
Gotcha. Yeah. So I just finished it. I mean, the ending is actually pretty unique too. So I'm interested to see what you think about that. But I would have a tough time kind of debating between this and Monster Sanctuary as to between like the two
mhm.
most modern ones that we've played. But that's for the next tier list, everybody. I guess the next creature catching tier list, because we have other stuff to talk about. So let's move into the second half of the show for today, which is, of course, Summer Game Fest's. Well, I guess it's not Summer Game Fest, is it? It's the Extended Summer Games Showcase recap. And, there were so many games announced over this time. And so instead of going through every showcase, and listing off everything, just because there's so many things, we'd be here for like a 5-hour episode. We're just going to go through and highlight some of our, more standout games from the other showcases around. So I guess we'll just go kind of in order of what we have listed on this list here, which leaves us off with Beastieball, a very unique game, which reminds me a lot of Dodgeball Academia.
Yes, that is the first thing when I saw this game. I was like, I have to tell James because this is Dodgeball Academia meets like creature capture. It's such a cute looking game. So the premise is it's a creature capture, but instead of it being battles, the turn-based combat is games of volleyball,
So
which
smart.
is where Beastie Ball comes into it. And so your moves are like, like block and like pass and like different types of shots that you can take, and it just looks like such a cute like way of like contextualizing one of these games.
100%. And like, why do creature catching games always have to be like turn-based strategy? It's so smart to use that type of collectible, loop, but just do something different with it. And who doesn't like a good game of volleyball? Like this looks like a standout game to me, or a standout idea at least. If they can execute on it, I'm totally in, especially after playing Dodgeball Academia and liking it so much. Not to say this is a good comparison. They're made by totally different people, but great idea, I would say.
Yeah, this will go on the creature catching list at some point. And you know what? I will give them props too. From this was from the day of the devs showcase, and I will say their trailer ends with like one of the creatures evolving, and they like just barely show you its outline, and then not what it looks like. And that was like such a smart tease in the trailer that I was like, damn, I'll play this game. Like, you got me.
Totally. The one thing about it, I will say, is we were just praising the other game so much for its design. This game is not striking me with the same level of like, wow, these creatures are like really impressive and cool. They look kind of more like Neopets-ish, which is still fine, but it's like...
They're like Neopet Nexomon, like, it's not quite as exciting. Although I do like that little chicken with shorts on. I think that there's something funny about that guy.
He looks fast. The next game we had was Hyper Light Breaker, which we're playing all these trailers, of course, on the video side as well. But this game we've seen before, obviously, but it is definitely one of the more, impressive looking games we're waiting for, I guess, on the indie side.
Yeah, so this is Heart Machine's sequel to Hyper Light Drifter. It looks quite a bit different to play than the first game, but like just the world and the design, like they've got really creative art teams, I always find, with the studio. And this just looks fun. It's kind of open. I think they've said it's pretty like open exploration. You can kind of do things in a lot of order. There's so the combat is almost kind of like action with like elements of bullet hell. It looks like you can go around pretty fast. Like, I think this world looks so cool. And one of my favorite parts of it is I just love the like bright neon style. Like, you don't get very many games in this type of genre that aren't just kind of like more grim dark and there's a lot of blood splatters everywhere. But this one's like neon bright lights, and it's just got such its own unique aesthetic.
You know what's funny about it to me is the game, I mean, aside from the bullet hell stuff, obviously that's pretty unique to this, but it really reminds me of watching Zelda gameplay in a lot of ways. You get the glider, you're exploring this world. Obviously, I'm not saying this is anything like Breath of the Wild or anything like that, but, at the same time, you're kind of traversing this world, and I guess it's just more combat focused and whatnot for this, which is interesting to me for sure. And so I know like the pedigree of the first one, something to watch. For sure. And speaking of something to watch, this might be, if Persona spoilers wasn't announced, our next one might have been like my most exciting thing of this show. Like, I know we've seen this before as well. Excuse me, I feel like I'm losing my voice a bit. But Viewfinder is gotta be like the most impressive thing that I've seen in quite some time, when you're just talking purely about like, holy shit, they made that. Like, I can't believe how seamlessly it works. There's one point in this trailer, and for those that aren't familiar with Viewfinder, it's kind of this game where it plays with perspective. It's one of these puzzle games where you can put down like a picture of a beach sunset or something like that, and then when you move back from it and your perspective changes, it actually becomes like it's actually there. Like it just seamlessly becomes part of your environment, and it is amazing.
Like this game is the kind of game I look at and I think like, how did someone even create this? Like, it's such a marvel. It blows my mind, the level of like creativity and the level of like forethought of how you could actually make these things work. Because sometimes you walk into the photograph itself and you're in this new area, and sometimes you just tilt it in a way as such so that it makes like a bridge to get somewhere else. Like, so you can use them, or like maybe like that one, you just grab an object that you need from inside.
Yeah, and they're putting two beside each other as well, so they can interact. Like it's. I can't believe this game doesn't break when you do some of these things.
Yeah, like this is like super liminal kind of style game, but like just taken to the next level. It looks so incredibly interesting to play, and like the way that it like warps reality as you're looking around or looking at things from different angles is just incredible. Like, I think out of all the games on here, like this is the one I'm most interested in, just because it's so incredibly like creative and different. And like, man, if it works well to play, which it looks pretty polished in the trailer, like this is like a standout one of those like 10 out of 10 games that's like only possible in the medium of video games. That you could not have this experience anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Like it'd be like watching Inception, but you know, like that's the closest type of style. But either way, like this is definitely something I want to play this year. We say we want to play a lot of stuff and it just isn't feasible, but I think I actually am going to play Viewfinder just because of it just looks so cool.
This is potentially like my next upcoming day one purchase.
Yeah.
I think this game is just so incredible.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about this more on the show. At least one of us is going to buy this. There's no doubt about it. So instead, talk to me about Spirit of the Samurai this is Chants of Sennaar. This is a game I did not actually catch, so I'm interested to see.
This came from the Tribeca showcase from a little studio called Run Disc. So first of all, it just looks like, it comes across very much like one of those sort of journey kind of style, like a really unique art style, a lot of exploration. And it's inspired by the Tower of Babel, which is a neat take I've never seen in a game. There's apparently a really good book by R.F. Kuang I want to read. But anyway, this is the game. And so you're kind of exploring the city, like it's bold, bright colors, different perspectives, you're moving around, light puzzle exploration. But then the hook that really interested me is the idea that people from all over the world come to Babel. It's like a center of knowledge. And so everybody in this place speaks a different language. And so one of the main running themes in the game is like coming together and understanding everybody who comes from a different culture. And so you have, the trailer shows like later, like you have notebooks and you're like filling in bits of script so that you can understand like pieces of language. And when you talk to a character, you learn a little bit more. And so the main puzzle of this game is centered around just like understanding different scripts and like puzzling out like Rosetta Stone kind of style of like what words they're saying and then like being able to translate, which is so incredibly cool. Is like an English and linguistics major, this game was like about language. I was like, I have to play it.
This sounds like similar to that project you told me you were working on. Like this, you have to play this game, right? Like this is made for like you in a certain way. That's cool.
Exactly. These are like gaming and like, you know, like literature and language coming together, like my two biggest passions. Like this game, like absolutely blew me away. I was on board when it seemed like a cute journey game, and then it got into the meat of it, and I was like, holy shit, this.
Yeah, it looks cool. It reminds me similar idea to Signs of the Sojourner, like when I was when I played that last year, kind of about language as a card game, and I guess it's a different take, but similar to like, you know, getting along with others and learning to speak and communicate. And it's a nice
I think it's
sentiment.
Similar kind of premise, but I think this game looks like it's going to be like dig a little bit deeper into like the way the language works as opposed to just more of like the ideas behind it. But yeah, Sounds of the Sojourner is definitely a game I thought of watching this trailer.
So the next one we had was the other one that I unfortunately missed, and this was Spirit of the Samurai. So this is obviously looking pretty different compared to the other game we just saw.
Yeah, this looks cool. This looks like a badass game. This really reminds me of like a Trek to Yomi style game. Like it's got a really unique art style and kind of that like 2D sort of like you're fighting your way across the screen against various enemies or bosses. And then it's supposed to have a neat kind of spiritual story. So I think Trek to Yomi is definitely like the game that comes to mind looking at this.
I was gonna say, because I played Trek to Yomi and that did remind me a lot, like those side-scrolling parts. That being said, though, I thought Trek to Yomi like wasn't quite as impressive as I was hoping for, despite looking really cool. So maybe this is like, you know, that thing was awesome, that little spider guy.
Well, anyone who just looks on the screen, yeah, it's kind of like traditional Japanese style, but then you have these times where you go into like spirit mode and there's just like the weirdest, like creepiest, gross, goopy monsters in this game, and like they're surprisingly like, look at this thing, it's terrifying.
It's like stop motion.
Yeah, so it is stop motion. I'm pretty sure there's genuinely like stop motion monsters in this. Like it looks cool. I think it's a bit more like action and a bit more like hack and slash than something like Trek to Yomi, which was very like much slower paced. But yeah, this game like came out of nowhere and looks really incredibly cool.
Yeah, one to watch, no doubt. Okay, so Checkmate Showdown. What a game, hey? So this is basically now correct me if I'm wrong, but this is basically you just play chess, but then when your pieces have to fight, you get into like a Street Fighter-esque battle where you play as the character. So like if you're a pawn, your pawn is probably going to be weaker than whatever is the rook or the queen or something. So it's sort of chess, but it's not just strategy, it's also like skill in these matches, which is a very interesting take.
Yeah, it's like a fighter, but also chess at the same time. The Rook is the funniest thing. Like, he's just this massive, like, grapple character.
He's Zangief.
He's
just Zangief.
Yeah, he's just Zangief. But yeah, like, it looks cool. I really want to play this game, partially because I think it's just hilarious. Like, we finally got chess too. But also, like, I joined a chess club at school. Like, I've been playing against this guy, and he has just, like, swept the floor with me like 12 games in a row. Like, I just can't beat him. So I now have to get good at Chess Showdown because I've made the statement of like, oh look, I can finally beat you in chess. The only way I'll win. Like, you can take all my pieces, doesn't matter, but I'm gonna kick your ass.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. I wonder like how much the fighting will matter compared to the chess, and I wonder like, is the king gonna be just also really weak and useless, or is he gonna be like a powerhouse fighter in this game and actually like change up how you might strategize playing chess?
See that? Yeah, that's the thing, is I don't really know. Like, it's not super clear what happens, right? It's like if you go to take an enemy's piece, but they beat you in the fight, like, do you just not take their piece? Yeah. Does your piece die? Like, I don't know how it exactly like works with chess, but just the premise alone is like, I want to play at least a few games of this. Like,
just to see how it works, right? Yeah. Okay. So next up, we have a short little trailer for the Bookwalker, Thief of Tales.
Yeah, so this is another book-based game. So I wrote that down. It had book in the title.
This man's got a tall hat, I can tell you that.
Yo, that's tall hat Logan. But yeah, first of all, the art is really interesting in this game. It's a really neat looking trailer. I believe it's supposed to be like a... Honestly, I don't even know what the gameplay's like. This trailer does not show gameplay, but I believe the concept is like you can keep going into different books and worlds. And so I think at the very least that makes for a really neat experience where you're just constantly getting bombarded with new things. Yeah, it was a feature game show. I think this is the first look we've had at it. It's got book in the title. I'm going to keep my eye on it.
And that's all we need to know, hey? Yeah, it does look kind of cool, though. Like, I like the especially the art on this splash screen here. It's very cyberpunk text. Looks interesting. So we finally had a new Persona 5 game announced. It wasn't P6, everybody. We know not to expect that for another little bit. But don't worry, we did get... Now, this was leaked as well, but we're getting a Persona 5 tactics game in the vein of Final Fantasy Tactics, or, you know, I guess... I don't know if it's more along that line or along the lines of Fire Emblem or whatnot, but I mean, do we really care? It's a tactics game made by Atlus in the skin of Persona with all the lovely, you know, stylings and everything you come to expect. I think they're using the Persona Q models, which is a little chibi style compared. It's not, you know, it's not as nice as the regular style, I wouldn't say, but I mean, I'm so interested to see what this ends up being. I know some of the spin-offs are considered to be pretty good, like the fighting game in the Persona series are supposed to be pretty good. I don't know how I felt about sort of the Rhythm one or the Dynasty Warrior style, but those really aren't like my genres anyway, whereas this really is. So I think this looks like something very exciting.
Yeah, I'm super on board. Like, I'm definitely gonna play this game. Like, I want to play all the Persona spin-offs, but because it's Persona. But like you said, like those other ones, just they're not in the genre that I would normally go for. But like this, 100% is up both of our alleys. I think the only thing that is a little bit disappointing is I'm not super into the chibi art as much. Like, it just doesn't appeal to me. However, the whole rest of the game, like the style is still so Persona 5, like all the menus, all the different, like, you know, where all the flourishes on all the moves, like it just is so nice to look at, and I'm so happy to have more to do in the Persona 5 world, especially since they keep teasing us and not giving us Persona 6.
Yeah, no kidding, hey? Oh. But I'm so with you, and just seeing like some new environments, you know, give us some new monsters, and there's definitely going to be probably a new character that joins the Phantom Thieves for the game or something, you know, who's their persona going to be? It's just another excuse to get together with this, you know, amazing cast and everything like that. So I don't know if it's being voiced, I guess, by the original cast. I'm sure it probably is. It seems like all these projects kind of get those people back, but that's what I assume. And speaking of Persona, we're going to switch the order a little bit, make some more sense, because not only did we get Persona 5 Tactica, we also got the official announcement for Persona 3 Reload, everybody. And this is very exciting. So Persona 3, the portable version, Persona 3 Portable, was on my Xbox on Game Pass. And I'm sitting there being like, this is my next game after I play Final Fantasy 7 or Final Fantasy 16, because that's coming out next week. And that's totally changed my plan now, because we're getting a full-on remake of Persona 3. So as good as Portable is, this has really been modernized. This is from the ground up remake. It's being made more in the vein of Persona 5 instead of sort of the dated Persona 3 style. I think it's been claimed that it has the most voice acting, the largest percentage of lines voice acted in any of the games that they've done in the series. It brings the social links forward, everything like that. I just couldn't be more excited to play this, especially since I've heard a lot of people say, that 3 actually has one of the better stories in Persona. It's just that, is a little dated on the gameplay side. So honestly, like, as much as it's Persona 6 seems to be taking a long time to come out, like, this is a brand new game for me. And so I couldn't be happier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is fantastic. I'm so glad this exists. I definitely want to play it at some point. I mean, it's coming to Game Pass, so like, how could you not have a reason to play it, assuming that you are one of the few that have adopted this new lifestyle. But yeah, it just looks so good. Like, the dated mechanics are what always would put me off of playing the older games, and also they're not very accessible. They're hard to find. Like, a lot of them are on handheld. Like,
well, I was gonna buy it on my Vita at one point until it came to Game Pass that little while ago.
Exactly, like, they're kind of hard to get your hands on, so I just love that they're kind of like reviving the series and giving people who, especially since 5, I think, was such a big intake of players for Persona. I know that's like, how we got into it, and so it's nice to be able to go back and like relive all the other games with having these modern conveniences and on a platform that is really accessible. So
yeah, it doesn't get easier than Game Pass, does it?
No, it does not. You sit down, you install it, you laugh at everyone who doesn't have Game Pass, and then you have the best time
I don't laugh. I cry for those people. I feel bad. Yeah. I mean, we're gonna talk about this game a lot when it comes out, so we'll save any more Persona 3 for then. And when I drop everything, and no matter what else I'm playing, and this becomes my life, that moment. So after that, we have let's change gears completely and talk about Mariachi Legends, which is like. It looks a lot darker than I thought it was going to be when I first heard the name of it. Click the trailer. It's actually like a side-scrolling detective game on a train.
Yeah, I think there's like an element of detective fiction. There's also like some light Metroidvania and some like action combat. It looks pretty cool, like a nice little like 2D action game, but I just think the art sets it apart so much. It's a gorgeous game to look at. The characters are really expressive. The environments are really beautifully lighted and detailed. And then also I just really like the kind of like, the mariachi like Mexican kind of styling. I don't think we get tons of games with that influence. And when we do, they're often very like lighthearted, silly games, whereas this looks like a much more serious take. And so I like that because, I don't know why Mexico always has to be silly, but
yeah,
it
exactly.
doesn't. So
it's interesting. It reminds me a lot of Castlevania Symphony of the Night in its art style, like the graphic style of the game. And then you're right, like the character art actually is really cool. Reminds me almost of like, I don't know if it's like a style like Hades or something, but there's a lot of detail in these characters here. Really nice.
Yeah, they have amazing, like, beautifully hand-drawn characters and then put in this like gorgeous 2D like pixel art. It just looks so incredibly stylish. And then I love the idea that you're also just like solving some kind of like detective story at the same time. Like, this very easily could have just been one of those like 2D action games that like, the point is just to fight stuff and play, but it's like, no, like, you're a detective too, and that's really an appealing little wrinkle on it for me.
Well, don't worry, Kate. In your future, you can be a mariachi legend yourself when this game comes out. So
I think I
so
will.
You might have to do that. Last game on our list here is a game called Cocoon, and this is not the first time we've seen this one either. But I wanted to. Oh, this is the Persona trailer. I messed up.
We
I'll
can
look up the
watch it
Cocoon
again.
trailer. We can.
I mean, who doesn't want to watch the Persona trailer again? Like, yes, be excited.
Yeah. Let me just bring this up here. Oh boy, good podcasting, everybody.
Yeah. So Cocoon is another Annapurna game, which is very exciting because we still upcoming have the Annapurna showcase on the 29th.
Mm-hmm.
They just decided to do this at the end of the month, and I mean, this is what the team that did like Inside and Limbo. So
Yeah.
this is a hugely identified indie studio coming out with their next game.
Yeah, it's very interesting though. This is like a very different turn for them from what Inside and Limbo were. You know, those games almost you could confuse them for being the same thing. Very dark and atmospheric, and you know, light puzzle solving and whatnot. And this game is totally different. It's no longer a side scroller. You know, there's a lot of color and vibrancy in the world. It looks kind of like that game you had put on earlier. I forget what it was called. Hyperlight. Well, actually, that's not true. Anyway, this is a puzzle game, and it's kind of like a 3D isometric thing. And what you're doing is you're kind of moving in and out of different worlds, which are contained like in these little orbs that you find. And so you're moving them throughout the different environments, and you can take them like inside of the other worlds, I guess, kind of like the layers of a cocoon, why it's called that. And so when you move them around, like, okay, they're in the orange world, but if I bring this green ball in there, then I can use it to like activate these different switches and solve these puzzles, and it'll like open up different things you can do in each world, and you're sort of moving through the layers of this environment. It just seems like a very interesting take on how you could create puzzles with that kind of premise. And also the pedigree of the studio and this excellent typeface on the Cocoon logo is just it's drawn me in, you know, at that Annapurna pedigree.
This looks incredible. Like, this looks like a game to watch out for. I kind of worry that I'm going to be terrible at it, just in terms of like keeping my mind wrapped around like where all the different universes are in this like incredibly like weird onion of things. But it's so cool. Like, it just looks like such a creative game. Like, kind of like we're talking about Viewfinder, like in a different way, but just something that's so incredibly intricate and like video game only. And then you just, you know, add that to the cute little bug that you get to play as. And
that's a huge win. Yeah. I always like it when studios, I like it when studios like this take a very different approach, you know, like for as much as it would be cool if they were to come out and be like, you know, from the creators of Inside and Limbo, and then it was another dark and mysterious kind of environment. Like, I would be excited for that, but at the same time I'd be like, oh, you know, do I need to play this? It's probably like a similar type of thing. Whereas when they come out and they take a bold stab at like doing something totally different, I think it's a bit of a chance for sure. But I mean, I like that because to me it shows like they're passionate about hopefully making this other project instead of just like, okay, well, this was successful, let's stick with the same formula and crank out another game, you know. Like, I think that's something to praise.
Exactly. This is the super giant approach of like, okay, we've done that before, interesting, what did we learn and how can we apply it to doing something completely different? And that is like the best thing. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, sometimes you just want more of the same because it's like your favorite thing and they're the studio that does it the best. But other times it's like Cocoon, like, yes, okay, on board.
Yeah, it's an interesting line to walk, I guess. But in general, like, you know, new and surprising things is why I'm here more or less to watch these showcases.
That's why we watch the showcases, right? Like, everyone says like, oh, what are you hoping for? And I mean, there's always a few things that you really want to see. But largely I watch them all because I just want to see things that I've never seen before and be surprised by all these like people who are so much more creative and clever than I am.
Oh man, yeah. Well, I guess that's our recap of the rest of these showcases. So I know there's some we didn't really touch on anything from Ubisoft and whatnot, but you know, Assassin's Creed was there.
I will say shout out to Ubisoft. The new Prince of Persia actually looks pretty cool.
Yeah, I was close to adding that onto the list actually. Yeah, that looked cool. And you know, I did look that up before too, and there is the time mechanics in that game in some way. We were talking about that before. If we like, oh, can you rewind time or not? You can apparently. So that's cool. But that brings us to listener mail, everybody. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, you wouldn't know that we close out every single show with a listener mail question from someone in our audience. If you would like to be that special person on the next episode, you can write in to cloudcontrolpod@proton.me or get in touch with us on Twitter or in the comments or wherever you're watching. We don't mind, but we'd love to answer your questions. And we've got a pretty topical one today regarding a special holiday. Yeah,
so for everyone who knows, I don't know know if it's unique to just Canada or if it is
I don't know if it's North America.
worldwide.
That's a good question.
Maybe North American, but anyway,
Let us know.
at least in our part of the world, this recent weekend was Father's Day on the Sunday, and so we've got a question in honor of Father's Day this weekend. Who is the best or worst father figure in gaming? With the small caveat that it can't be Kratos because that's way too easy.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we did that answer last year when we got a similar question.
Yeah, he is the iconic dad, and of course we played Ragnarok last year's Father's Day, so just increases in the amount of like recognition of the word dad and Kratos coming to mind. Like someone says dad and I'm like my dad, then immediately Kratos afterwards.
That's right. So those things notwithstanding, I guess we'll come up with some different answers for today. I actually went above and beyond, and I got some a good dad and a worse dad, so I've doubled down here and I've got both. I don't know what direction you went, but I'm happy to.
I went to the good dad because I just think that's a little bit more like in honor of Father's Day instead of an here's a shitty dad.
Well, I had a funny one come to my mind, which is why when I read the question, I'll start off with the shitty one. I'll get it out of the way. The worst dad in video games is Ethan Mars from Heavy Rain. This guy doesn't know how to save his kid. He just runs around the mall yelling his name, has no idea really what to do. You know, he gets like at one point he actually thinks he's the culprit of this murder. Like he's totally incapable. He's a very bad father.
I think he has the one thing in Ethan's corner is he is willing to go to great lengths to save his child. I will give him, he's got the right kind of motivation, but he's also just like a terribly distant father.
Well, that's the thing. And there's even no guarantee his motivation will get him to the ability to save his son, depending what happens in the game. So, I mean, I can't back this guy. I can't back. I'd be calling social services if I knew a kid who was his parent. He was the parent of. So.
That's true. He's a pretty poor dad. Ethan Mars is kind of a loser. Is what we can say. That's
true. I'll hit you with my good one though, and then if you want to close us out afterwards. So I got a couple. I think Octodad is a great dad from video games. You know, he's just out there doing his thing. He's a great dad. But the other one I wanted to shout out was Lee Everett, and Lee is the father figure of Clementine in Telltale's The Walking Dead. Well, he's not actually her father. He's more of a a guy that finds her and is her chaperone through her adventure here and takes care of her and whatnot. But he's just a very caring dude, good dad, and stand-up guy. So Lee Everett's my answer.
That's a good answer. I think that's definitely like he's one of the like pinnacle father figures. I think it's from The Walking Dead, right? Yeah. I went kind of on a funny way, and I thought this was a funny character at first. But then as the more I thought about it, I was like, this is really a legit answer. And I went for Phoenix Wright. And the reason is because he is such a strong mentor. And it's throughout all of the games, like in the first trilogy, Maya Fey, and even the Pearl, the youngest daughter. Like he really takes those girls under his wing, and they really like depend on him. And then in the following trilogy, he gets Trucy,
their magic
right
panties.
Agency. Yeah, that's
a little weird.
That's weird out of context. I swear he's a good dad and not a creep. But yeah, he just always seems to have these characters that like fill the sidekick role. But they're more than just sidekicks. They really do kind of become like family to him, and he's just such a good he's always got time for Maya's jokes and like indulging in the samurai with her and silly little things like that. So I think Phoenix Dad is like low key Phoenix Dad.
Phoenix Dad. See, yeah, that's a great answer. Honestly, I really like that answer. I guess there's more to being a dad than just biologically having the kid. Sometimes you can just be their father figure, and that means a lot too. That's really cool. What a sentimental note to end the podcast on. How lovely.
Yeah, well, shout out to all the dads out there. Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day, everybody.
Maybe you saw one of these games in the showcases that would be a cool game to play with your dad, and that's, a great thing to be able to look forward to.
I agree. You should introduce your dad to Persona 3 Reload.
If we had to play one of these games with our dad,
man, out of all the games we talked about from this, I think Checkmate Showdown would be really funny with him because he knows how to play chess. So
Yeah, you're right. That's probably the game he'd beat you at chess, but then lose at the fighting. So
Yeah.
it might balance out.
Exactly. Honestly, the real answer though is Viewfinder. Like, I would love to show him Viewfinder
Yeah.
just because of how freaking impressive it is. Like, I think everyone should see that game. Honestly, is that cool?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Anyway, thanks for the great question, and of course, write in to give us your question for the next episode if you would like. But yeah, that's going to close us up for the show. Thank you for joining us. Next episode, who knows what we'll be talking about, but it will be the 30th episode of the show, so we hope you'll join us then. And remember, until then, this has been Cloud Control, and it's the gaming podcast that's not just good, it's good enough. So we'll see you on the next episode.